This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
Britain becomes the first country in the world to approve the use of the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine. We look at the planned efforts to rebuild the Tigray region after federal forces claimed victory in the northern Ethiopia conflict. And why the Gulf of Guinea off the West African coast remains the most prone to piracy in the world. Hello and welcome to Africa Live on CGTN. I'm Lindy Mtongana in Nairobi. Also ahead this hour. In business, South Africa forecasts a slow economic recovery from COVID-19. And we bring you the latest from China's unmanned mission to the moon. Well, we start the hour with some exciting developments in efforts to contain the COVID-19 pandemic. Britain has become the first country to approve Pfizer-BioNTech's COVID-19 vaccine for general use. The vaccine should start arriving in the UK within days, and it could be used across the UK as early as next week. On Wednesday, the government said in a statement that the first people to get the vaccine will be priority groups. This includes care home residents, health and care workers, the elderly, and those who are medically vulnerable. The UK has secured 40 million doses of the two-dose mRNA vaccine. Media reports say the delivery will occur throughout 2020 and 2021 in stages to ensure an equitable allocation of vaccines across the world. Well, as the UK prepares for distribution, many other countries around the world against time to develop vaccines that will prevail over the coronavirus pandemic. And as Daniel Arap-Moy reports, different technological approaches are being employed to get the vaccines.
Now, according to the WHO, there are currently more than 100 COVID-19 vaccine candidates under development, with a number of these in the human trial phase. Now, some of the companies behind the vaccines include Pfizer, and BioNTech's vaccine was the first vaccine to achieve a milestone of 90% efficacy. Now, this came after interim analysis from its phase 3 study. The drug has since been confirmed to have a potency of up to 95% against COVID-19. Another promising vaccine comes from Moderna, a biotech company whose experimental vaccine is reportedly 94.5% effective in preventing the viral disease. Novavax, a biotechnology company, has also completed enrollment of 15,000 participants in a pivotal phase 3 clinical trial being conducted in the UK. Now, this will determine the efficacy and safety of its NVX-CoV2373. Now, while these milestones are being celebrated internationally, especially in the rich and developed nations, Africa is still in the thick of the coronavirus pandemic, and the duration of the uncertainty occasioned by the disease is still not known. Health systems remain overstretched. Now, there are fears that not everyone will be able to afford COVID-19 vaccine. The risk of the vaccine nationalism taking center stage now makes it hard for other nations across the world to access these vital vaccines. But the continent is hopeful after the launch of COVAX. This is a new global purchasing initiative pushed by WHO that will also finance COVID-19 vaccines for low and middle income countries. Now, with the rest to secure an effective vaccine ongoing, many hope the world's wealthiest countries will not take the lion's share of the much needed vaccine. Back to you.
Well, let's return now to the news that the UK will start rolling out that Pfizer-BioNTech vaccine as early as next week. Andrew Wilson joins us live from Oxford. Andrew, certainly remarkable news, a really significant development in the fight against COVID-19. But just talk us through the UK's approval process, why this vaccine and exactly what went into deciding to start rolling it out as early as next week.
Well, the decision is taken by a body called the MRHA, the Medical and Healthcare regulation agency. It's the equivalent of the FDA in the United States. And when any vaccine, of which there are 3 now under consideration, finish their phase 3 trials, then all the data assembled from those is packaged up and passed on to these people who can look through. Now, that can be a fairly quick process. And in the case of this Pfizer vaccination, it's turned out to be very quick. They simply go through the data. They conclude that they're satisfied that the data makes sense, that the drug has proved, the vaccine has proved to be safe as far as the phase 3 trials are concerned, and therefore they give authorization for it to be rolled out. It's quite possible that tomorrow they'll roll out one of the other 2 vaccines, the Moderna one or the Oxford University one, and say that too has satisfied their inquiries. Once that's the case, what is different this time around with COVID-19 is that under normal circumstances, that would then mean, with the permission of a body like the MRHA, the vaccine would go into production. But because of the COVID-19 emergency, the vaccine has already been produced and ordered by various countries. So the UK has an order in for 40 million doses of this drug, which is enough for 20 million people, 2 doses each. And there's already about 10 million believed to be in the country or on its way into the country right now. So they can begin straight away with what will probably be quite a complicated logistic task of starting to prioritize and actually start to vaccinate people.
Yeah, let's talk more about that. It will be a complicated task. We know that they have now identified priority groups, but just tell us how exactly this might work.
Well, prioritizing the groups is just the first part of a much bigger battle. Below the iceberg, there are all sorts of challenges. For example, these new RNA vaccines, like the one that's been approved now for Pfizer, they need to be transported and stored at minus 70 degrees. Quite possible, but you do need specialist refrigeration units to do it and specialist transportation units to move them from one country to the other. For example, our dose of the vaccine here in the UK is coming from Belgium. So once they're brought down to the normal refrigeration temperatures of -2 to -8, they only last for about 5 days and then they lose their efficacy. So you have to be very organized. When you start to thaw out these batches of vaccine, you need to know where they're going and who they're going to and get that completed. The other complication is that, of course, the patients will require 2 doses, 21 days apart. So it's one thing getting everyone vaccinated for their first dose, but you've got to make sure you have the contact chain set up to make sure all those people come back again for their second dose. It's likely it'll start in the hospitals because they have the refrigeration capacity to store the vaccines, and also they're the heart of the first priority clients for the vaccine, which is healthcare homes for the elderly and also for the staff that work in those homes. Once those have been vaccinated, then they'll move on to other healthcare staff and patients over 80, and then start moving down the high-risk categories and the age categories into the general population. But by then we're talking about January, February. The other problem is persuading people to take the vaccine. So they have to make sure that the information is transparent and clear, and that the general public will understand and accept the notion of having a vaccination and will not go on the internet and read all sorts of conspiracy theories about it being a bad idea, which might lead to people having 1 dose and then changing their mind and not having the second dose, which could complicate again the thoroughness of the inoculation around the country. So there's a lot for them to get right and a few possibilities for things still to go wrong.
Indeed, and the world will be watching. I'm sure there'll be many lessons to be learned from the UK's experience. Thank you so much to Andrew Wilson joining us there from Oxford. Now, as the world continues to grapple with the coronavirus pandemic, a group of community educators in Kenya are playing their part to ensure that people with HIV continue to access treatment in the country. The community campaign is in line with the Health Ministry's own efforts to ensure continued access to antiretroviral drugs for those living with HIV.
When you see them sorting through boxes of medication, you know they're about to make an important delivery. These are community health educators based at a facility on the outskirts of Nairobi. For years, they have worked as part of a team that encourages HIV testing, offers support, and delivers antiretroviral medicines right to the doorsteps of persons with HIV.
Kazi ya kupeleka madawa tulianza kitambo kidogo.
Initially, we'd find that some patients were bedridden and couldn't get to the hospital to collect the medication. So we decided to help them by delivering to them.
So tukaamua kujitolea.
In 2020, as a coronavirus pandemic swept across the country, the number of those who needed this service rose.
What we saw at the beginning of the pandemic is that many people shunned coming to the facilities for fears of, getting infected. So we even saw the numbers of people who come to the outpatient centers across Kenya dropped. The numbers really went down between March and June.
Wale huwa tunadelivia madawa.
The people who we deliver to are those who miss the appointment with us. Some work in homes around here. Others also work in hotels and other businesses where they are denied permission to leave to collect the medication. So when they call, we deliver discreetly because we don't want them to miss a dose.
So akipiga simu hapa, huwa tunampelekea dawa kwa sababu hatutaki akose dawa.
It is an important consideration as the country works to ensure that the gains it has made in the fight against HIV do not roll back during the pandemic. Currently, Kenya has about 1.5 million people living with HIV, a prevalence rate which has declined to about 4.9% since the early years. Of these, over 1.1 million people are on antiretroviral therapy.
Is really we want to ensure that we are able to identify up to 90% of the people who are living with HIV through testing. And as a country, we have made good progress, but we are still lagging behind. We are at around 79 to 80%. So we know that we still need to do more work.
What the country has done well is to put most of those who need antiretroviral drugs on treatment and ensuring they adhere to the treatment. Patients who are stable can now get 3 months' worth of medicines to ensure that they remain on treatment wherever they are. But this is just one in a raft of measures geared towards tackling HIV. Health workers are now also focusing on preventing transmission of HIV from mother to child, ensuring children adhere to antiretroviral therapy, and scaling up HIV testing, especially among men. And as the world marks World AIDS Day, these soldiers on the ground are an important part of the fight against HIV by delivering daily doses of life. Wilkie Sanyabwa, CGTN.
Meanwhile, South Africa has made impressive progress in recent years in getting more people tested for HIV. In 2017 alone, the country reached its first 90-90-90 target. That means 90% of people living with HIV were aware of their status. That's according to South Africa's Health Minister, Zweli Mkhize. He was speaking during a commemoration of World AIDS Day. CGTN's Yulisa Jamela has more.
The 90-90-90 is a concept introduced by the UNAIDS in 2014. The idea is that by 2020, 90% of people who are HIV infected will be diagnosed. 90% of people who are diagnosed will be on antiretroviral treatment, and 90% of those who receive antiretrovirals will be virally suppressed.
According to the United Nations, 38 million people were living with HIV in 2019, and over 7.7 of those people are here in South Africa.
And just over 2 million of those are on antiretroviral medication. With these statistics in mind, HIV/AIDS activists, government, and the country at large commemorated World AIDS Day. The day was observed under the theme, "We are in this together." Cheka impilo, meaning check your health status. The theme is aligned to the global theme for World AIDS Day, which is Global Solidarity, Shared Responsibility.
This is a clarion call to every South African to make responsible health choices, since the social well-being of a community depends on the actions of every individual within that community. Each one of us needs to play their role in reducing new HIV and TB infections.
At the same event, activists from HIV/AIDS activist group, the Treatment Action Campaign, or TAC, lamented the government for largely ignoring another pandemic, TB, which often exacerbates the HIV pandemic. People with damaged immune systems, such as those living with HIV, are at much greater risk of becoming ill with TB.
We have the pandemic that has been killing us, especially as poor people, which is TB. TB has been killing us forever. And it's killing thousands and thousands of people every year. Last year alone, 2019, TB has killed more than 63,000 people in South Africa alone. And in the world, it has killed more than 2 million people. But we don't see world leaders talking much as they did with COVID-19.
Due to COVID-19, it has been difficult to maintain HIV program performance whilst dealing with the pressing urgency of this unprecedented crisis.
The health minister pledged to ensure that TB and HIV programs receive even more support. Yuli Sanjamada for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
A team led by the director of the Africa Centers for Disease Control and Prevention has been visiting the Democratic Republic of Congo. The team has assessed and tested the country's level of preparedness in the event of another Ebola outbreak. Well, the DRC has made progress in tackling the disease in the past, and the Africa CDC has been providing equipment and expertise to support their response.
We are here actually to look at how we can strengthen the networks between the center in Gabon and this vast opportunity that exists here, like this center of excellence that we are visiting today. So the Africa CDC will try to strengthen that. The second thing we would like to do is to carry forward our training, the regional training on Ebola as a whole, to really make sure that this becomes a center of excellence of Ebola. If you look at how Ebola is emerging in this country, something suggests that we are moving towards almost an endemicity of outbreak of Ebola here. From 2017 to present, Ebola has been emerging here almost every year, with the largest outbreak in North Kivu. So we cannot continue to react. We have to actually take a more proactive measures by strengthening centers like this. So Africa CDC stands by to work with Professor Moyembe's team and the government of the Democratic Republic of Congo.
Well, time now for a short break. Here's what's still ahead on the program. We look at planned efforts to rebuild the Tigray region after federal forces claimed victory in the northern Ethiopia conflict. And why the Gulf of Guinea off the West African coast remains the most prone to piracy in the world. Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories. Let's have a look. We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice. Let's start in Ethiopia now, where the UN and Addis Ababa have signed a deal to allow humanitarian access into the Tigray region. Reports indicate that access will only be allowed in parts under federal government control. The first mission to carry out its task, rather a needs assessment, will begin today. The region of around 6 million people has been cut off during fighting that began a month ago. For weeks now, the UN and other humanitarian agencies have been pleading for access amid reports of food, medicine and other supplies running out. Well, for the latest developments, let's now go live to Addis Ababa, where CGTN's Girum Chala is standing by. Girum, there are reports that a senior politician with links to the Tigray leadership has in fact surrendered to Ethiopian federal authorities. What more can you tell us about this?
Lindy, the senior politician you are talking about, her name is Keria Ibrahim. She was one of the top 9 executive members of the Tigray regional states leadership until last week, that is. And she reportedly surrendered last night in Tigray, federal police custody pending investigation. Just to give you a bit of a background, Keria Ibrahim was also in the federal government's leadership. She was of the House of Federation, on one of the top jobs that people have in this country when it comes to government administration. And she's also one of the well-respected politicians in Tigray regional state. She left that position in the federal state of being a speaker of the Federation and rejoined the TPLF when things were getting serious at the end of the day. And now she is surrendered. The government sources are telling us that this happened after the Prime Minister has called for Tigray regional state leadership to surrender so that any bloodshed should not be happening in that regional state. So Keria's, by the way, surrender is yet another milestone for Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed's administration in its quest of bringing those perpetrators in the Tigray regional state of the conflict into justice, Lindy.
Well, Girom, we know that aid workers will start coming into the Tigray region for the first time in about a month. What do we know about the deal between the UN and Ethiopia to allow humanitarian access into the Tigray region?
Well, after the conflict in the Tigray regional state, even throughout, the UN has been expressing its concern on the dire humanitarian situation in that part of the country, and it's been calling on the opening of safe humanitarian corridors while the active war was happening. Now that most of Tigray, including the Mekelle city itself, is in the hands of the federal forces, UN is calling that because of the current situation that is not changed, because the humanitarian situation is still dire. It needs serious attention and intervention at the same time. It is asking for a supply of medication, supply of food, and even shelter for those people who've been evicted. The UN is now with the Ethiopian government, more particularly the Ministry of Peace and the Refugees and Returnees Agency of Ethiopia. This collaboration is expected to result in the supply of the medication. For instance, in some of the hospitals, it's hard to get even antibiotics, so it's hard. The UN is trying to help in that regard. And also, the most important job on the ground now is to return those people in Sudan, the thousands of them, back to this country and start the work of rehabilitation. And at the same time, also support the internally displaced people due to the conflict. So the collaborative work of the UN, more particularly UNHCR, and also the Ethiopian government and UN OCHA is expected to result in resolving some of the most serious humanitarian problems in this country. So at the moment, roads are being opened for them. At the moment, the government is also saying that it is trying to rebuild some of the ravaged infrastructures, including airports and roads. So we have to wait and see in the next few days. This is going to result in helping the refugees survive and recapture their lives again.
And Girom, now that active fighting has subsided and the federal government has taken control of key parts of the Tigray region, how will the region itself be reintegrated back into Ethiopia's federal government?
Well, a bit of correction, perhaps, Lindy, for our audience. The Tigray regional state remains, even if the war was going on, under the Ethiopian authorities, one of the members of the federation itself. The war was happening because according to government source again and the Prime Minister himself, the Tigray regional state went rogue. It was armed and dangerous and was attacking the army in this country and even making the conflict international. The Tigray regional state is within the state of Ethiopia itself. But now the question so many people ask is, how can Tigray regional state be rehabilitated and it can even build trust again with the federal government? Because of the TPLF's position, which is, by the way, saying that the federal government is unconstitutional, unelected, according to TPLF leadership. They've been complaining about this for a long time. We have been holding elections on our own. We are the legal leadership. So this was the confusion in the first place. So now that the federal government, as we've said, is in control of almost all of Tigray, the next job is going to be, engaging the public so that trust can be built between the federal government and the Tigray regional state itself, and also the provision provisional administration that is intended in the region to place it there so that public administration, public services, government services can resume in that regional state. And one thing I can tell you, Lindy, is that this work has already started. The provisional administration has started nominating even mayors and provisional leaders in Tigray regional state. So in the next few days, perhaps we can hear more improvements in this regard.
Thank you so much, Kirum Chala, joining us there live from Addis Ababa. Now, meanwhile, a Syrian refugee who has been living in Sudan for 4 years is helping supply clean water to thousands of Ethiopian refugees who fled the unrest in Tigray. Tuli Shabalala has more on this volunteer at the Hamdayat Border Reception Center.
Salam Kanush fled Syria in 2016. He says this happened after he was kidnapped and robbed while leaving Aleppo. The university student now lives in Sudan and devotes his free time to helping other refugees and people in need.
We are here with Kopi. We are providing the water supplies for the refugees here in Hamdayat. And we have a big number here, so the water is really an important issue.
The 29-year-old is a volunteer for the Italian aid organization COOPI. He works on purifying water, setting up transport routes and locating water sources.
We came with the idea of providing the water as Kopi, so I was in charge of finding water trucks, tractors, the right solution, because the area here, you see how it's hard to find the water source. So we came up with the idea of 3 tractors go to the river, we treat the water with the chlorine, and we have a water station like 1.5 hours away.
The water is filled in large sacks and can be accessed through taps by refugees. Violence in the Tigray region of Ethiopia forced thousands to flee their homes. Many are struggling to get basic supplies like food and water.
In Sudan, here I wanted to give an example that the refugees are not really problems. Now we hear about refugees that are related to sadness, hunger, poor people, they always in need, but we are not like that. So some people can really make a change. So in the beginning in Sudan, a lot of people calling me a refugee. I didn't accept it in the beginning, but later on this is happening. It's the media, everyone knows this. So I started volunteering in the community, and I'm a basketball player, so at first I started teaching young people basketball. And we won the bronze medal in the Sudanese competition for schools in 2017.
Kanush says he is on a mission to prove that refugees can make a big difference. He has also founded an organization in Kassala that empowers women and youth to start their own businesses. Tuli Shabalala, CGTN.
The waters of the Gulf of Guinea off the West African coast continue to remain the most prone to piracy in the world, making life difficult for vessel owners and seafarers. In November alone, data from Global Maritime Watchdog, the International Maritime Bureau, showed at least 9 attacks occurred in the Gulf of Guinea, with 115 seafarers kidnapped for ransom in the region. Now, this despite several initiatives by navies of the region to fight the pirates. CGTN's Deji Badmus has more.
The waters here may look calm, but they are among the most dangerous in the world as far as sea piracy goes. The Gulf of Guinea is one of the busiest maritime routes on the continent, but hardly does a month goes by without an attack occurring on the 6-kilometer stretch of water. For ship owners like Aminu Umar, piracy is a constant threat.
The incidences are almost happening every time, so avoiding it is like trying to avoid rain when it is raining from everywhere. So it's very difficult, some of us, to avoid it.
In the first 9 months of this year, the International Maritime Bureau Piracy Center recorded 132 attacks, with kidnapping for crew members for ransom accounting for the bulk of the attacks. 95% of the kidnappings happened in the Gulf of Guinea.
So we are, as ship owners, we're finding it difficult to be able to attract the best of the seafaring nationals worldwide. There are many very good seafarers who have very good experience and knowledge that they can transfer to some of our seafarers here in Nigeria, but they're not willing to come here because they are so scared. And we have so many countries in the world have already banned their nationals to come into this part of the world to be able to do a seafaring job.
Navies of the region have in recent times intensified their efforts to stop the pirates. And while they have foiled some attacks, pirates continue to devise new methods to beat the security agencies at sea.
I think in the interim, we should, the government and all the stakeholders should look at the short-term solutions and medium-term solutions. We have seen it. It has helped in solving this piracy thing in the Somali area, which is the Gulf of Aden and the Indian Ocean. So we should have also adopt a short-term solution. And one of it is to license or make sure that there is escort that is supposed to protect those ships. When there is a licensed escort service providers within the Gulf of Guinea that are licensed for the entire region, then it makes it impossible for attacks to be so frequent.
Piracy in the Gulf of Guinea is coming at a huge economic cost, which is in turn driving up the cost of shipping to the region and ultimately the price of imported goods. Ship owners are having to pay a premium to keep their operations going.
Gulf of Guinea is considered to be a high-risk zone, so you pay almost triple insurance premium that you're supposed to pay if you're trading in a place that is not considered as high-risk zone. Likewise, for the seafarers that have come to decide to work here, even though they collect very high salary, in order for them to be motivated to take the risk, you have to pay what they call war risk bonus. War risk bonus is you have to give them a bonus for operating within this high-risk zone.
For now, the shipping industry is having to bear the cost until the governments of the region find more lasting solutions to the perennial problem. Deji Badmos, CGTN, Lagos, Nigeria.
And now to a big step forward for China's unmanned mission to the moon. The Chang'e 5 probe has collected its first batch of soil and rocks. It got to work drilling 2 meters below the lunar surface just hours after touching down. And if successful, this will be the first time in 40 years any country has brought moon rocks back to Earth. CGTN's Tang Bo reports.
More good news for the Chang'e 5 spacecraft as it looks to shore up and continue with its exploration of the moon. But the 15 minutes it took to execute its landing were not easy.
The most difficult part of the landing is for the modules to hover 100 meters above the lunar surface. The module's engine thrust must counteract the lunar gravity so that the modules can hover there and evaluate the situation of the landing site before touching down the surface.
With its touchdown complete, the Chang'e 5 will collect up to 2 kilograms of rock and soil.
After the surface operations are completed, one of the 2 modules carrying the samples will take off to try to rendezvous and dock with other modules waiting in the lunar orbit. A safe landing on the moon brings the mission one step closer to success, but a lot more work is needed to bring the samples home. Tang Bo, CGTN, Beijing.
A reminder of your top stories this hour. Britain has become the first country to approve the Pfizer-BioNTech COVID-19 vaccine for general use. The vaccine should start arriving in the UK within days and could be used across the country as early as next week. South Africa has made impressive progress in recent years in getting more people to test for HIV. In 2017, the country reached the first of its 90-90-90 targets, with 90% of people living with HIV aware of their status. And the waters of the Gulf of Guinea off West Africa continue to remain the most prone to piracy in the world. In November, data from global maritime watchdog, the International Maritime Bureau, showed at least 9 attacks occurred in the Gulf of Guinea, with 115 seafarers kidnapped for ransom in the region. Your business news up next. Here's what's coming up. South Africa forecasts a slow economic recovery from COVID-19.
There's more to this place than just glorious landscapes. There's more to it than just, say, Table Mountain or glorious, endless salt flats. There's more to it than countries that are home to some of the deepest mines in the world. There is so much more to this place, even if it is home to some of the finest diamonds on the planet. It is the sheer diversity of the people who call Southern Africa home, and the relentless drive to make it a better place that make it so special. And we know that because this too is home. No one knows Southern Africa like we do. CGTN, see the difference.
You don't find the stories of North Africa by sitting on the sidelines.
You've got to get out, go there, and you'll find them. In the bazaars of Casablanca, among the crowds in Cairo,
who come to visit Cairo, the ancient capital of Egypt.
Along the waters of the Nile, along the sands of the Sahara. No one else will take you where we can in North Africa. No one else will show you what it's all about. CGTN, see the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Business news now. South Africa's economic recovery from the coronavirus crisis is likely to be slow and difficult. That's according to the country's central bank, which kept its main lending rate at 3.5% last week after steep cuts earlier this year. CGTN's Angela Coppola has more from Johannesburg.
On the other hand, the local mining and agricultural sectors have helped to turn the economy around in the third quarter.
The third quarter was 40% better than the second quarter. So if you just take that straight and you say we 0.8% of the, or 8% of the economy, that gives you a 4 percentage points just coming from us, and agriculture was better. So there's been a huge V-shaped uptick.
The economic recovery is not even, with some sectors doing better than others.
It's going to take a long time to recover from this. We are not looking at a V-shaped recovery, as some economists have described it in other places. We're looking more at what some have described as a K-shaped recovery. It will get back to where it was for those that are on the upper end or who are more well off, and professionals who can work from home. Those who are at the bottom of the economic ladder, that they are going to struggle.
According to The Economist, the mining data masks an issue that is playing into the country's favor.
So tonnage is actually still down by 13, was down in September by 13%. But value-wise, we've been doing very well because we saw a 25% improvement in commodity prices in rand terms, and the rand is still about 12% lower than the year before on a 12-month basis.
Eskom remains the main stumbling block, and not only because of its inability to provide reliable energy. The utility is attempting to increase its tariffs and recoup past operating costs.
The number is 71 billion that they want, that they say they are in arrears. Now, how that is going to be liquidated is the word that's being used. So how is it going to be phased in? We don't know.
While job creation remains a critical component of the new reconstruction and development plan, there is another pressing need.
The other side is to bring back demand, because what we are seeing is a lot of businesses, particularly small businesses, have struggled as a result of declining demand. So it's your customer interfacing type businesses. So businesses retailers or who might run restaurants or small operations, they are going to be struggling.
Regardless of what you do and what business environment you operate in, the recovery in South Africa is going to be a long and difficult one. I'm Angelo Coppola for CGTN in Johannesburg, South Africa.
The world's two largest producers of cocoa, Ghana and Côte d'Ivoire, have accused several big chocolate companies and traders of trying to sidestep a premium on cocoa prices that's meant to help fight farmer poverty. The Ivorian Coffee and Cocoa Council and the Ghana Cocoa Board say companies like Mars, Hershey and Olam are trying to avoid a $400 per ton living income differential, or LID, that is added to the price of cocoa bought from either of those two countries. Now, the heightened tensions come after Hershey this month took the rare step of sourcing its cocoa beans from the futures market in New York. Analysts said the purchase through the exchange meant Hershey's did not have to pay the LID. Regulators from the two nations sent a letter to Hershey's banning the Pennsylvania company from operating chocolate sustainability programs in the two African countries. The Tunisian parliament has adopted a law relating to the financing of an important part of the state budget for 2020. The controversial legislation authorizes Tunisia's central bank to finance the treasury by granting it an amount of not exceeding $1 billion. Funds will be dispersed within 2 weeks upon the adoption of the law. CGTN's Adnan Chouachi has the details.
Under the supplementary finance bill, the government plans to reach a volume of resources for the Treasury estimated at $7.1 billion against $4.1 billion under the initial finance law. The amount represents a significant increase of $3 billion.
We project a negative growth rate of 7% in 2020, a rate that the economy of modern Tunisia has never seen, not to mention the fall in state-owned resources by 5.6 billion dinars. The increase in spending, especially the 1.1 billion dinars on COVID-19, which led to an increase in the deficit by 11.4% of GDP, not raising unemployment, which reached 16.2%.
Salary expenditures in the supplementary finance law increased by around $190 million to reach $7.1 billion against $7 billion scheduled in the initial 2020 state budget. Similarly, management expenses increased by $109 million to reach about $738 million.
The bleeding of public finances has disrupted all of Tunisia's financial balances and now represents a real danger to national sovereignty. The solution is to master the management of the expenditures and streamline them.
The 2020 public debt services will be around $4.2 billion against $4 billion expected in the initial budget, while the volume of the public debt reached $36 billion, or 88% of GDP.
It's unacceptable to continue with a state budget that exceeds 50% of GDP. This is the result of the failed economic and political policies. We cannot build our future economy by repeating the same mistakes and increasing the volume of debt without creating jobs, development and business opportunities.
The Minister of Finance noted that external loans will also finance the deficit, pending the approval by the House of People's Representatives of other loans. In addition, the state will also resort to borrowing from the domestic market.
Prime Minister Hichem Meshishi declared that the supplementary finance budget for 2020 will not revive the national economy, but will rather prevent further deterioration. Meshishi said the situation is the result of several factors, including the COVID-19 pandemic and the lingering economic crisis. Adnan Chouachi, CGTN, Tunis.
Let's take a short break. Coming up on Africa Live, we tell you how budding entrepreneurs in Nigeria are developing their own beauty product brands and cashing in big time.
The greatest journeys, the greatest sights, the greatest adventures.
Here, this weir allows the locals to walk on water.
We're far more than just TV news. We're your passport to the wonders of Africa.
To bring you stories of struggle, survival and hope.
So let's explore. CGTN. See the difference.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Nigeria's beauty market has seen rapid growth as demand for beauty products increases. The industry has raked in over $1 billion annually since 2018, and that's presented a viable market for budding entrepreneurs who are cashing in on the industry by developing their own brands. CGTN's Kelechi Mekalam brings us the story.
23-year-old Mira Daliop wrapping up the final stage of her makeup production. During the COVID-19 lockdown and amid the university strike, the graduate of geography was keen on putting her time to good use. After nights of research, she birthed a cosmetic line called Mirage Beauty Brand. She produces cosmetic products like lip gloss, balm, and body scrubs from organic extracts.
About 50% of or more of the products, the ingredients I use are organic. There's what we call the Versagel. That's the base for the lip gloss. That's what makes lip gloss. Everything that we use are specifically made for your skin. Everything has to be made for your skin. They work for chapped lips, they heal chapped lips, they prevent you from having chapped lips. They're very moisturizing, hydrating. I put in a lot of love, a lot of time and effort into my products, and I make sure that everything is perfect and it's the best for. I test my products for weeks before I sell it to people.
Since launching in August, Mira has a growing customer base across the country, especially for the lip gloss, which has now become her signature piece.
It's really a nice experience. Like when you put it on, it blends in quickly than some lip glosses that I've used. The colors are subtle, not too bright, just nude enough to fit in like your normal lips. And it has a very nice fragrance.
Mira started with a capital of about $200. In 3 months now, she makes an average 50% profit. But it's not been a walk in the park for the young cosmetic producer.
I don't know, sometimes I just lose, because when you make some products, like it doesn't turn out well at all. That's my personal failure now. It doesn't turn out well, but then you have to keep doing. So you lose sometimes. Well, business is a risk that you have to be willing to take.
The cosmetic and personal care industry globally has a turnover of about $400 billion, and in Nigeria, the sector is currently worth $3 billion, according to Euromonitor International. And there are projections that the figures could rise. But it's a highly import-driven industry. So entrepreneurs like Mira are hoping to tap into the multi-billion-dollar industry and expand their distribution beyond the shores of Nigeria. Kelechi Mekalam, CGTN, Plateau, Nigeria.
Well, let's go to Cape Town, South Africa now, where after months of closure due to the COVID-19 pandemic, the Slave Lodge Museum's doors were once again opened. Visitors took a trip back in time to understand the significance of the abolition of slavery to South Africa's past. CGTN's Travis Andrews has this report.
As the second oldest building in Cape Town, the Slave Lodge was once a symbol of brutal colonial oppression. Now it's a museum and a beacon of hope for many in South Africa. It's for this reason that the museum's doors were open, to commemorate Emancipation and World AIDS Day, two issues that run deep and wide in South Africa.
It is extremely important for South Africans to commemorate these days in terms of remembering who we are as a nation and where we come from as a nation and where our roots are situated. We need to understand that we have a very tight link to enslavement and to slavery, and that most of South Africans are connected in terms of bloodlines through slavery.
Emancipation Day's origins date back to the abolishment of the slave trade in 1864, when British Parliament passed the Slave Emancipation Act. Today, visitors can view artifacts from the height of the slave trade. It is through this room, though, that historians draw the historical linkages that has made the country commemorate both Emancipation and World AIDS Day.
Within the hospital, within the slave lodge, we found that what they called venereal diseases was treated mostly, more than any other illness during that period of time. And because of these venereal diseases, we have this link to this building in terms of STDs and sexually transmitted diseases, and that is why we celebrate or commemorate HIV/AIDS World AIDS Day.
While the slave lodge's permanent exhibitions give an incredibly detailed representation of the past, it will soon go through a revamp to update the collection.
Besides being an educational collection that we have, it's for visitors from all over the world to come and see what it is that we have, because what we have on display, it's a minute amount of what we actually have in the collection.
Due to the COVID-19 pandemic, both the Emancipation and World AIDS Day commemorations have largely been held online. But Ezekiel Museums is still encouraging all visitors to make their way down here to the Slave Lodge and bear witness to the timeline of both scourges. Travis Andrews, CGTN, Cape Town.
Time for a short break. Your sports news up next. Coming up, South Africa fondly remembers Maradona for his role as Argentina coach at the 2010 FIFA World Cup.